Let's dive into a story that will make you question everything about trust, faith, and the people you think you know best. This is the story of Pastor Jerome Wallace, a 52-year-old man of God who spent his entire life serving others, preaching love, and extending grace to everyone who walked through his church doors. A man who lost his wife to cancer and spent 6 years drowning in loneliness, searching desperately for a second chance at happiness. But when he finally found someone who made him feel alive again, someone who understood his pain, someone who promised him freedom and a future, it was all a lie, a carefully crafted trap, set by the one person he trusted most, his best friend, his confidant, his brother in Christ. So ask yourself this: what would you do if the person sitting next to you in church, the person who knew your deepest secrets, your greatest fears, your bank account numbers, was planning your murder? Would you see it coming? Or would you walk straight into the trap, blinded by trust and paralyzed by loneliness? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because by the end of this story, you'll understand just how easily betrayal can disguise itself as brotherhood, how loneliness can become a weapon, and how a single Instagram message can lead to a brutal death in the Texas woods. This is the true story of Pastor Jerome Wallace, the man who gave everything to his community and lost everything to the people he loved most. This is True Crime's Altar, where love turns lethal, family secrets unravel, and truth explodes into violence. If you're drawn to haunting true crime stories told with raw emotion and gripping detail, subscribe now, share this video, and let us know your thoughts below. The September heat still clung to Texas like a wet blanket on the morning of September 22, 2019. Deep in the woods off Highway 71, about 40 miles west of Austin, a hiker's voice cracked over his cell phone as he tried to describe what he'd just stumbled upon. His dog had been barking frantically at something in a shallow ravine, something the hiker wished to God he'd never seen. "It's a man," he told the 911 dispatcher, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. "He's been hurt. Real bad. I can't even describe it." Texas Rangers arrived within the hour, pushing through thick brush to reach the body. What they found stopped them cold. A black man in his early 50s, dressed in casual clothes, lying face up in a small clearing. But this wasn't just a dumping ground. The crime scene spoke of rage, calculation, and something far darker than simple murder. The victim had been mutilated, his genitals removed with surgical precision. There was no sign of struggle in the immediate area, suggesting he'd been killed elsewhere and dumped here. His wallet was missing, but his watch remained on his wrist. A gold cross hung around his neck. In his front pocket, investigators found a phone with a cracked screen and a receipt from a gas station dated 2 days earlier. This discovery would unravel one of the most twisted betrayals Texas had ever seen.
Thank you, Lord, for your guidance and blessings.
Jerome Wallace wasn't flashy. He didn't live in a mansion or drive luxury cars. He was the kind of pastor who showed up at hospital bedsides at midnight, who paid grocery bills for struggling families out of his own pocket, who remembered every name in his congregation. He led New Hope Baptist Church in Cypress, Texas, a suburb northwest of Houston. The church wasn't large, maybe 250 members on a good Sunday, but it was tight-knit. Born in Baton Rouge in 1967, Jerome was raised in the church by his schoolteacher mother and postal worker father. By 16, he knew his calling was ministry. After attending Southern University and New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, he was ordained at 30. In 2005, Jerome married Claudia, a nurse he met at a church revival. She was his everything. They moved to Texas together when New Hope offered him the lead pastor position. For 8 years, they built a life together, talking about adopting children and growing old side by side. Then, in May 2013, Claudia was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. She fought for 6 months. Jerome never left her side, preaching on Sundays, then spending the rest of the week in hospital rooms, holding her hand, praying, believing God would heal her. She passed away on November 9, 2013. Jerome was 46 years old, and the light in his life went out. After Claudia's death, Jerome threw himself into ministry. He worked longer hours, counseled more people, visited more homes. His congregation worried about him, told him to rest, to grieve, to take time for himself. But Jerome didn't know how to stop. Stopping meant sitting alone in the house he once shared with his wife. Stopping meant feeling the silence that pressed against him every night. His closest friend during this time was Deacon Victor Hayes, a 38-year-old man who had joined New Hope in 2011. Victor was sharp, educated, worked in finance, and had a way of making people feel heard. He handled the church's books, managed tithes and offerings, and always seemed to know exactly what to say when Jerome was struggling. After Claudia's death, Victor became more than just a deacon. He became Jerome's confidant, his brother, the person Jerome turned to when the weight of grief felt unbearable. They met for breakfast every Tuesday. They talked about life, faith, and loss. Jerome trusted Victor with everything: his finances, his fears, his loneliness. That trust would become the door through which betrayal walked in. By 2019, 6 years after Claudia's death, Jerome was still alone. He'd tried dating a few times, awkward setups arranged by well-meaning church members, but nothing ever stuck. He felt too old, too tired, too damaged. So he did what millions of people do when loneliness becomes unbearable. He turned to social media. In late April 2019, Jerome was scrolling through Instagram when a post stopped him. It was a beautiful black woman in her mid-30s, standing on a balcony at sunset with her arms stretched wide. The caption read, "Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means it no longer controls you." Jerome stared at those words. They hit him in a place he hadn't allowed anyone to touch in years. Her name was Simone Du Bois. She had 800,000 followers. Her bio read, "Life coach, wellness advocate, survivor, helping women break free from toxic cycles." Her feed mixed motivational quotes, wellness tips, and deeply personal captions about overcoming abuse. She spoke openly about surviving a controlling marriage to a pastor, about rebuilding her identity, about learning to trust again. Jerome read post after post, feeling like someone had written his pain in a language he finally understood. For 2 weeks, he checked her page every night, reading her words, listening to her voice in video clips, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, hope that maybe healing was possible. Then on May 12, 2019, Simone posted a photo of herself sitting on the floor of an empty room, head in her hands. The caption was raw. "Some days I still feel trapped. Some days I wonder if freedom is real or just something I'm pretending to believe in." Jerome's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He told himself not to do it, that she'd never notice him, that he was just another random follower. But something in him broke open. He typed, "Freedom is real. And you're closer than you think. Keep believing." He hit send before he could stop himself. The next morning his phone buzzed. It was a direct message from her. "Thank you for that. I don't know why, but your words felt different. Like you actually understood." That single exchange changed everything. What started as one message became 2, then 5, then 20. By the end of that first week, Jerome and Simone were talking every day. She told him about her childhood in New Orleans, how she lost both parents in a car accident when she was 19. She spoke about meeting her ex-husband at a church conference, how he seemed like a man of God but turned controlling once they married. According to her, he isolated her from friends, monitored her phone, dictated what she wore, even controlled her career as a speaker and coach. She claimed she was trapped in a legal and financial cage, unable to fully break free. Jerome listened to every word. He understood loss. He understood loneliness. And he understood what it felt like to be controlled by circumstances beyond your power. He shared his own story: Claudia's death, the emptiness that followed, the years of pretending to be strong while crumbling inside. Simone didn't offer shallow comfort. She didn't tell him to pray harder or trust God more. She just said, "You deserve to be seen. Not as a pastor. As a man." Those words undid him. Their conversations moved from Instagram to text messages, then to late-night phone calls. Jerome would finish his evening prayers, close his Bible, and dial her number. They'd talk until 2, 3, sometimes 4 in the morning. By early June, Jerome wasn't just talking to her. He was falling for her. He told Victor about it one Tuesday morning over breakfast. "I think I've met someone," Jerome said quietly, stirring his coffee without looking up. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Online?" Jerome nodded. "Instagram. I know how it sounds." Victor smiled, but something in his expression was unreadable. "What's her name?" "Simone. She's a life coach. Lives in Dallas." Victor leaned back, studying him. "You been talking long?" "About a month. Every day. Sometimes all night." Jerome finally looked up, and his eyes were wet. "Victor, I haven't felt this alive since Claudia. I know it's fast. I know it might sound crazy. But she sees me. Really sees me." Victor reached across the table and gripped Jerome's hand. "Brother, if she makes you feel that way, don't let her go. You've been alone too long. You deserve this." Jerome exhaled, relief flooding through him. He needed to hear that. He needed someone to tell him he wasn't being foolish. Victor's approval meant everything. What Jerome didn't know was that Victor had already heard about Simone. In fact, Victor knew her better than Jerome ever could. Because Simone Dubois wasn't her real name. Her real name was Sienna Cross. And she wasn't a life coach from Dallas. She was Victor's girlfriend, and they had been planning this for months. Sienna Cross was born in Atlanta in 1985, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She grew up watching her mother struggle, watching men take advantage of her kindness, watching poverty swallow dreams whole. By the time Sienna was 16, she'd learned a critical lesson: beauty was currency, and if you were smart, you could make it pay. She met Victor Hayes in 2016 at a financial seminar in Houston. Victor was different from the men she usually targeted. He was educated, well-spoken, and worked as a financial analyst before joining New Hope Baptist Church. He had a clean record, a respectable image, and a hunger for more than his 9-to-5 could provide. They connected immediately, not romantically at first, but intellectually. They both saw the world the same way. People were marks, and if you were smart, you could take what you needed without ever getting caught. By 2017, they were a couple. And by 2018, they had a plan. Victor had positioned himself perfectly at New Hope. He was the church treasurer, the man who handled every dollar that came through the doors. He had access to financial records, tax documents, and personal information on every member. More importantly, he had Pastor Jerome Wallace's complete trust. Victor knew everything about Jerome: his salary, his savings, his loneliness, his guilt over not moving on from Claudia. He knew Jerome checked Instagram late at night. He knew Jerome longed for connection. And he knew Jerome had over $150,000 in savings. That's when Victor brought the idea to Sienna. "I've got a mark," he told her one night in early 2019. Mid-50s. Pastor. Widower. Lonely as hell. Sitting on a pile of money he doesn't know what to do with. Sienna listened, intrigued. "What's the play?" "You build a profile. Make yourself irresistible. Not just physically, but emotionally. You become everything he's been praying for. I'll feed you everything you need to know about him. His triggers. His pain points. His faith. You hook him, reel him in, and when he's deep enough, we take him for everything he's got." It wasn't the first time they'd done this. Between 2017 and 2019, they'd run variations of the same scam on 3 other men, all wealthy, all lonely, all too ashamed to come forward. They'd made over $200,000 combined. But Jerome was different. Jerome had more money, more stability, and more to lose. This was going to be their biggest score yet. Sienna spent weeks building the Simone Dubois persona. She purchased Instagram followers, created fake engagement, posted carefully curated photos that made her look successful but vulnerable. She wrote captions designed to attract broken men looking for someone to save. And then she waited. Victor fed her everything. He told her when Jerome was online. He told her what sermons Jerome preached, what struggles he shared during their Tuesday breakfasts, what songs made him cry. He even told her about Claudia, how she died, how Jerome blamed himself for not praying hard enough. Armed with that information, Sienna crafted every message, every response, every vulnerable confession to perfectly mirror Jerome's pain. She didn't just catfish him. She weaponized his grief. And Jerome never stood a chance. June bled into July, and Jerome's conversations with Simone deepened in ways that made him feel reborn. They talked about everything: scripture, childhood wounds, favorite foods, dreams they thought they'd never get to live. Simone told him she'd always wanted to visit Rome, to see the Vatican, to walk where Paul once walked. Jerome admitted he'd never left the country, that he'd spent his whole life serving others and never took time for himself. "Maybe we could go together," she said one night, her voice soft over the phone. Jerome's breath caught. "You'd want that? With me? Why wouldn't I? You're the first man I've trusted in years, Jerome. You make me feel safe." Meanwhile, Victor watched it all unfold with clinical precision. Every Tuesday, Jerome gave him updates, smiling wider each week, glowing with a hope Victor knew was built on lies. And every Tuesday, Victor encouraged him, told him Simone sounded like a godsend, told him not to let this chance slip away. In early July, Jerome told Victor he was thinking about asking Simone to meet in person. Victor's expression didn't change, but inside, he was already calculating. "That's a big step. You ready for that?" "I think so. I mean, we've been talking for months now. It feels right." Victor squeezed his shoulder. "Then do it, brother. Life doesn't wait." That night, Jerome called Simone and asked if she'd be willing to meet him in person. There was a pause on the other end of the line, just long enough to make his heart race with fear that she'd say no. "I want to," she finally said. "But I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this being real. Of getting my hopes up and losing you like I've lost everyone else." Jerome's heart broke for her. "You won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere." She let out a shaky breath. "Let's meet." "But not in Houston. Not in Dallas. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere just for us." She suggested a small lakeside cabin near Austin, a place she said she'd rented before for retreats. Peaceful. Private. A place where they could finally talk face to face without distractions. They set the date, September 20th, 2019. Jerome marked it on his calendar like it was a wedding day. But as September approached, Simone introduced a problem. It came during a late-night call in early August. Her voice was strained, like she'd been crying. "What's wrong?" Jerome asked immediately. "It's him. He's trying to block me from leaving." "What do you mean?" "I told you he controls my business, my brand. I've been trying to buy out my contract, to sever ties completely so I can be free. But he's demanding more money than I have." Jerome sat up in bed. "How much?" $75,000. The number hung in the air like a weight. Jerome swallowed hard. "That's a lot." "I know. I've been saving for 2 years, but I'm only halfway there. And if I can't pay him by September, he's threatening to take me to court, to ruin my reputation, to make sure I never work again." Her voice cracked. "Jerome, I just want to be free. I want to start over. With you." Jerome's chest tightened. He thought about Claudia, about how he couldn't save her. He thought about all the years he'd spent alone, wondering if God would ever give him a second chance at love. And here was Simone, the woman who made him feel alive again, trapped by a man who wanted to destroy her. "I can help," he said quietly. "What?" "I can help you. I have savings. I can." "No." Her voice was firm. "Jerome, I'm not asking you for money. That's not why I'm telling you this. I know that. But I want to help. If this is what's keeping you trapped, if this is what's standing between you and your freedom, then let me do this. Please." There was silence. Then, softly, she whispered, "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She cried. She told him he was the most incredible man she'd ever known. She told him she didn't deserve him. And Jerome sat there, feeling like a hero for the first time in years. Victor had scripted every word. On August 15, 2019, Jerome walked into First National Bank in Cyprus and requested a wire transfer for $75,000. The money moved from his account to an account registered under Whitfield Wellness Consulting LLC, a shell company Sienna and Victor had set up months earlier. That evening, Simone called him, sobbing. "You did it. You really did it. Jerome, you saved me. I told you I would. No one's ever done anything like this for me. No one's ever cared this much." Jerome smiled, tears streaming down his face. "I love you." There was a pause. Then, softly, she said, "I love you too." What Jerome didn't know was that the moment the money cleared, it was split 3 ways. 25,000 went to Sienna. 25,000 went to Victor. And 25,000 went to a man named Dante Cross, Sienna's cousin, who had been waiting in the background for his cut. Dante was 34 years old, built like a linebacker, with a criminal record that included assault, burglary, and medical fraud. He'd worked as an EMT in Atlanta for 3 years before being fired for stealing medications. He was dangerous, unpredictable, and loyal to Sienna above all else. Victor had brought him in as insurance, just in case things got messy. On the morning of September 20, 2019, Jerome woke before his alarm, too excited to sleep. He showered, dressed in jeans and a casual button-down, and grabbed his bag. By 6 in the morning, he was on the road, the early sun just beginning to stretch across the Texas sky. He stopped for gas around 8 at a small station off Highway 290. The receipt would later become a critical piece of evidence. By 9:30, he was pulling into the gravel driveway of the cabin Simone had told him about. It was tucked away in the trees near Lake Travis, isolated and quiet. Exactly what she'd promised. Jerome parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, his heart pounding. This was it. He grabbed his bag, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the cabin. The front door was slightly open. "Simone," he called out, his voice tentative. No answer. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was small, cozy, with wood-paneled walls and a stone fireplace. It smelled like cedar and dust. And standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed, was Simone. She looked exactly like her photos, beautiful, poised, flawless. But her expression was wrong. There was no warmth, no excitement, just something cold and distant. "Simone," Jerome said again, stepping closer. She didn't smile. She didn't move. And then, from the shadows near the hallway, a voice spoke. "Hello, Jerome." Jerome turned, and his blood went cold. Victor Hayes stepped into the room, hands in his pockets, his face calm. Jerome's mind scrambled to make sense of what he was seeing. "Victor? What are you doing here?" Victor didn't answer right away. He just looked at Simone, then back at Jerome. "I'm here because this is where it ends." Jerome's legs felt weak. "What are you talking about?" Simone finally spoke, her voice flat. "I'm sorry, Jerome. I really am." Jerome's breath came in short, sharp bursts. His eyes darted between them, trying to understand. "You know each other?" Victor smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Jerome had ever seen. "Know each other? Jerome, Simone is my girlfriend. Has been for years." The words didn't land at first. They hung in the air like something too impossible to be real. Jerome shook his head. No, that doesn't make sense. We've been talking for months. We fed you everything you wanted to hear," Victor interrupted. "Every word. Every late-night call. Every confession. It was all a script, man. And you fell for it. Hard." Jerome's chest tightened. He looked at Simone, searching her face for some sign that this was a misunderstanding, that Victor was lying. But she just stood there, silent, her eyes on the floor. "Why?" Jerome whispered, his voice breaking. Victor shrugged. "Why do you think? The 75 grand was just the start. We were going to take you for everything. Your savings. Your retirement. The church's building fund. All of it. But then you started digging." Jerome frowned. "What?" Victor pulled out his phone and held it up. On the screen was a forwarded email, sent from Jerome's personal account to a private investigator in Austin. The subject line read, "Background check on Simone Dubois and Whitfield Wellness Consulting LLC." Jerome's stomach dropped. He'd sent that email 2 weeks ago, after a sleepless night where doubt finally crept in. He'd wanted to be sure, wanted proof that everything was real before he gave his whole heart away. He thought he'd been discreet. But Victor had access to Jerome's email. He'd been monitoring it for months. "You were going to expose us," Victor said coldly. "So we had to move up the timeline." Jerome's hands shook. "I wasn't going to expose anything. I just wanted to be sure. It doesn't matter," Victor said. "You know too much now. And we can't let you walk out of here." Jerome took a step back, his heart hammering. "Victor, please. I won't say anything. I'll forget all of this. Just let me go." Victor shook his head. "Can't do that, Pastor." From the back room, another figure emerged. Dante Cross, tall, broad-shouldered, his face expressionless. He was holding a tire iron. Jerome's legs nearly gave out. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't do this." Jerome's instincts screamed at him to run, but Dante was already moving, stepping between him and the exit. Jerome's eyes filled with tears. "I loved her. I thought." "You loved an idea," Simone said quietly. "You loved the woman I pretended to be. But that woman doesn't exist. She never did." Jerome shook his head, his voice breaking. "Then why did you make me believe?" "Because that's the job," Victor said flatly. "And you paid well for it." What happened next was brutal and calculated. Dante subdued Jerome with violence, then they injected him with propofol, a sedative Dante had stolen during his time as an EMT. When Jerome regained consciousness, he was bound in the back of a van, being driven to the woods where his body would eventually be found. They killed him in those woods. They mutilated him to make it look like a hate crime, something that would throw investigators off their trail. And then they dumped his body in a shallow ravine and drove away, believing they'd gotten away with it. But they hadn't counted on Jerome's instinct to protect himself. 2 weeks before the meeting, Jerome had hired a private investigator to run a background check on Simone Dubois and Whitfield Wellness Consulting. He'd also updated his will and left a sealed letter with his attorney, to be opened if anything happened to him. In that letter, he mentioned Victor's access to his accounts and his growing concerns about the woman he'd been talking to online. When Jerome's body was discovered on September 22, 2019, the investigation moved quickly. His phone records revealed months of communication with Simone Dubois. Investigators traced the Instagram account and discovered it was fake. Followers purchased, photos stolen, engagement manufactured. They traced the wire transfer to Whitfield Wellness Consulting and found it was a shell company. But the breakthrough came when they examined Victor Hayes' financials. 2 days after Jerome sent the $75,000, Victor deposited $25,000 into his personal account. The same day, Sienna Cross deposited $25,000. And so did Dante Cross. The money trail led investigators directly to the conspirators. On Victor's laptop, forensics recovered deleted files containing scripted messages designed to manipulate Jerome. There were notes on Jerome's psychology, his vulnerabilities, his financial status. There was even a timeline detailing when to introduce the money request, when to schedule the meeting, when to execute the final play. Most damning were the emails between Victor and Sienna discussing what to do about Jerome's suspicions. One email, dated September 19th, read, "He's getting suspicious. Asking too many questions. We need to handle this in person. Make it clean." On October 1, 2019, all three were arrested. Dante's apartment contained surgical tools still stained with blood. Victor's calm facade crumbled. Sienna broke during interrogation, admitting her role but claiming she'd been coerced, that she tried to stop them, that she hadn't known they would kill him. The trial began on February 10, 2020. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the Instagram scam, the wire transfer, the money split 3 ways, the emails, the forensic evidence from Dante's apartment, and Sienna's partial confession. On March 5, 2020, the jury returned guilty verdicts for all 3 defendants. At sentencing on March 20th, Jerome's sister Renee spoke through tears. "My brother was the kindest man I've ever known. You didn't just take his money. You took his hope. You took his trust. You took everything. Jerome died believing he was going to meet the woman he loved. He died thinking he'd finally found happiness. But instead, he found you. And you made his last moments hell. Judge Monica Reyes showed no mercy. Victor Hayes received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sienna Cross received 35 years. Dante Cross received 40 years. In the aftermath, investigators discovered that Victor, Sienna, and Dante had been running romance scams since 2017, targeting at least 5 other men before Jerome. 3 came forward after the trial, sharing their stories of manipulation and fraud. None had gone to the police, too ashamed to admit they'd been fooled. New Hope Baptist Church struggled after Jerome's death, but slowly healed. They hired a new pastor, established a scholarship fund in Jerome's name, and every year on September 22nd, they hold a memorial service honoring his life and legacy. Renee Wallace became an advocate for victims of online fraud. She speaks at conferences and appears on news programs, sharing Jerome's story and warning others about the dangers of romance scams. "My brother wasn't stupid," she says. "He was human. He was lonely. And that's what these predators count on. They find people who are hurting and they make them believe love is possible. And then they destroy them." Jerome Wallace's life was cut short by betrayal, but his legacy lives on. A warning, a lesson, and a reminder that even in the darkest stories, there is light to be found. Remember his name. Remember his story. And remember, when someone seems too good to be true, they probably are.